But first, a senior government minister has warned the coalition not to pursue cuts to immigration. That's despite the fact the latest news poll found 25% of Australians wanted fewer immigrants and 39% wanted a lot fewer.
Yeah, the Trade Minister, Don Farrell, isn't bothered by record high immigration, though. Here he was on Sky News this morning.
Now, the opposition will come up with a policy, I believe it's not this week, but it will be in coming weeks, to substantially reduce immigration. What's your reaction to that?
I'd be disappointed if they headed in that direction. Immigration is important for the future of this country. It should be a bipartisan issue.
What planet is he living on? Immigration is a great thing. And I mean, everyone agrees immigration is a great thing. So that's the first thing we've got to point out, that the idea of bipartisanship on immigration is never going to happen. Although some would say there's been bipartisanship from both parties for a long time, that is more and more migrants. But the issue is not immigration, it's the rate of immigration. And it's also perhaps where immigrants are coming from in terms of their ability to inculcate themselves into our culture.
Absolutely.
But for Dan Farrell to say immigration is wonderful,
yeah.
I would hate Don Farrell to say it's wonderful, I would hate to see any change to immigration, just beggars belief, particularly when you look at the polls. One Nation, 27% of Australians believe One Nation is the party best equipped to deal with immigration. 20% believe Labor are well able to handle it. John O'Daniam was talking about the Liberal policy earlier today, and he said, which they're developing, and he said, we really want to have a policy that's not divisive. Well, I don't think you're going to be able to come up with that because, as we saw from the answer from Don Farrell there, any cuts to immigration, they are going to make it about you don't believe in immigration, you don't want immigration. Immigration's built our country, and it doesn't matter how many times you clarify it's not immigration in and of itself, it's the rate of immigration. I don't believe the Labor Party or the Greens will allow the coalition to get away with that. They will continually claim you're racist, you're trying to divide the community. This is one of those arguments that the coalition are just going to have to stump up, gird their loins and make the argument no matter what comes back in their direction.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot of courage and conviction, but this is a debate that we absolutely need to have. I don't know what on earth Don Farrell was on about this morning. All I can put it down to is obviously immigration suits Labor politically because a lot of the migrant communities will vote for Labor, but also this is the only thing that's propping up this Ponzi scheme economy. So it's all well and good for Anthony Albanese and Labor to come out and say, oh, well, we haven't had a recession. Well, that's your answer as to why we haven't had a recession. Secondly, he's called for bipartisanship on the issue. Let's not forget that Labor has presided over an immigration nightmare. More than 1.2 million migrants have come into this country since Labor was elected. They're not even on top of any of their housing targets. They haven't been able to meet their housing targets. There was a poll done the other day to say that they're actually 20% behind. Yet we're seeing more and more migrants come into this country, James. So, where are we going to put anyone? Where are we going to put all these people? And I actually think, honestly, I think we should put it to a plebiscite. I think we need a population plebiscite to give voters a chance to say how many people we want in this country, how big do we want Australia to be, and what sort of a country we want to be. This is something that Pauline Hanson has called for a long time. It would never get up, but I think if you're not going to have the political courage to come out and say, this is what we're going to have to do. And bear in mind, it's going to be a very uncomfortable discussion to have. There's going to be people put out by this. You're going to hear racism thrown up. You're a bigot. You're a xenophobe. Absolute nonsense. Put it to a vote, I say. Let us decide how big we want this country to be. It was never meant to be a big Australia, but here we are in a big Australia.
I get the frustration that would say, let's have a plebiscite, because when you feel no one is listening to you, then you say, well, let us have our say. What would be better is if we had an opposition that had a substantially different policy, and hopefully the coalition will give us that, though they need to give us, I think, a target and some numbers.
Absolutely.
They can't go to voters and say, we generally believe in lower immigration, trust us. We've been there, done that, and been let down time and time again. So I really hope Susan Lee stumps up with a definitive number and then they make the argument between now and the next election. And as the polls are showing, people want immigration lowered. And it's not because they're racist, it's because the roads are chock-a-block, the hospitals, you've got to wait forever, etc., and you can't find a place to live.
Yes,
so...
no, absolutely. There were suggestions this week that Susan Lee would look at a cut of 100,000 to the NOM. But I was speaking to one of the experts on this matter, Leith Van Onselen, on my show on Friday. He said that that's not even enough. And my concern is that if you don't put a hard figure on it, if you don't come out with a proper figure on how much you want to cut the rate of immigration by, then it could go down the pathway that we saw with the Coalition, for example, on their nuclear policy before the election, where it was something that they prosecuted, but then it disappeared into the never-never. But don't forget, there was also an immigration policy that was put forward by former opposition leader Peter Dutton. But again, it wasn't prosecuted. The last two elections, there's been nothing really on immigration, James. But we've got a problem where we've got migration that is absolutely being thrust upon us, and we cannot get everyday Aussies into houses. And that's
power prices and immigration.
Totally.
Just take those two things, hammer them over and over again between now and the next election.
I agree.
And you never know what could happen.
No, exactly. And look, record high immigration wasn't the only thing that Don Farrell was defending this morning. He was also defending Chris Bowen's new role as leader of the UN's global climate negotiations. The Trade Minister said he was confident in Chris Bowen's ability to moonlight for the UN while performing his role in the Albanese government and maintaining his loyalty to Australia.
Chris is a perfect candidate for that job. He looks after these issues in Australia, and now Australia, with Chris, has the opportunity to do that on the national stage. We were disappointed that we weren't able to get the COP conference here in Adelaide.
Not everyone was so confident in Chris Bowen's ability, though. Shadow Finance Minister James Paterson, he reckoned that if our Energy Minister was going to lead COP31 negotiations in Turkey, well, he might as well just stay there.
Well, Chris Bowen should do two things when he heads overseas, particularly when he goes over to Turkey. He should thank President Erdogan for saving Australian taxpayers $2 billion by not having to host COP. And secondly, I think he should probably stay there because that's where his priorities are. He wants to be on the international circuit. He wants to be hobnobbing and negotiating at climate conferences. He has no interest in lowering energy prices for Australians.
Well, Senator Paterson, he's absolutely right in what he's saying. Who exactly is Chris Bowen right now? Is he the part-time Energy Minister, the COP31 President? Is he the Minister for Turkey, the Minister for International Affairs, the Minister for UN Summits at this point? Who exactly is Chris Bowen? As for Don Farrell, again, the fact that he's had to come out and say, don't worry, look, please don't panic, everybody. Chris Bowen's loyalties remain here in Australia speaks volumes. Look, James, Chris Bowen's broken many records during his time as the Climate Change and Energy Minister. He was the first one to tell us that our power bills would go down by $275. And he's the first to preside over an energy disaster where our bills have actually gone up by 40% under the renewables only experiment. And isn't it extraordinary? He can add another impressive feat to his repertoire. He's now Australia's first part-time Energy Minister. He'll be operating on a fly-in, fly-out basis, clearly, and remarkably will be representing two countries at once, both Turkey and Australia. I mean, the guy can't even get control over the energy crisis at home, yet he's going to, dance about over in Turkey as president of the COP31. And by the way, he said the other day it's going to give him all of the powers. That was his line.
He said it'll give Australia, and then he corrected it to me. Me.
So I say, look, Turkey can have him. If he's going to do part-time here, part-time there, just go. He's done nothing for this country already. Bye, go.
It's a bit odd, really, isn't it? He had one job, he's failing at it, so they've rewarded him with a second job. Normally, progressive left politicians end up at the United Nations, right?
Yes. Chris
Bowen's just started early. He's at the United Nations while working in his ministerial position. I don't see how he can't be compromised in this role because the whole point of COP31 is to demonise the West, developed nations, and the West is demonised. We have to pay all these other countries for the damage that we have done through the Industrial Revolution that gave them higher living standards. They demonise fossil fuels.
Yes.
Well, Australia is sitting on such ample supplies of fossil fuels. So how can you be a Western minister in a country that relies on or should rely on fossil fuels and working for the United Nations that demonises both of those? And then the third thing, of course, is that the UN are calling or demanding urgent action on climate change, which would fly in the face of things like cheaper and affordable energy and reliable energy. So I'm not sure how he can dance to the tune of his UN masters and promise Australians they'll get cheaper energy, reliable energy, and that they'll take into consideration, you know, the cost of living crisis that is invariably amplified by these UN policies that he's now running around supporting.
But the other thing is he was backed in by his constituents as the member for McMahon. He was given a portfolio under the Crown and now he's frolicking overseas. Honestly, I don't think that Anthony Albanese can keep him as a minister. If he's going to be part-time overseeing the renewables-only experiment and now taking on a job that is going to require him to be overseas quite frequently, he can't be here.
Well, the Albanese government's already made the argument, right? If Australia is pursuing net zero, what better place for the minister in charge of Australia's renewables rollout than at the top of the UN process, negotiating treaties that will invariably help Australia to reach that point.
Well, Anthony Albanese's exact words were, "Of course he can."
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Hey, Kevin Rudd is still there. Do you really think Chris Bowen won't be?
No, true.